Hello! This week's Aristeia 101 Simple Synergies. It's the Master of Puppets, Gaia and Fiddler. So down below you're going to get the early reading for this. It's going to be the minion rules and the controller rules. They're a bit to go over here, but for a quick refresher again, just click in the description below. Gaia, to control space and manipulate position. Siren is probably the most important ability Gaia has. You can target allies or enemies. This is fantastic with Fiddler. Using Siren to take Fiddler far past where she can go in one turn is a great boon for both. Fiddler can deploy her Vulcan jackpots 1-2 from her, and they can fire 1-5. While taking her into the enemy's deployment zone would be very risky, going right next to the scoring zone is, that's a possibility. Pick the one or the other adjacent to it. And really, when you're doing this, you can actually go ahead and set Fiddler up for the way you think the game is going to flow. It's a really versatile ability. Likewise, you could, if Fiddler's being threatened and the guy is there, you could just go and take away whoever's threatening poor Fiddler. Musashi, for instance. Teleport him away and teleport yourself away because you don't want to be next to him. Next up, Anafero is used to deploy Gorgonians, her minions. Now, they can be deployed range 1-4 from her, line of sight required, which is further out than the 1-2 range the Vulcan jackpots have. Having the Gorgonians act as blockers for the jackpots allows you to limit the movements of enemies while in a hazardous area, because they'll be in the jackpot line of fire. Keep in mind that jackpots and Gorgonians are minions. Minions are obstacles. Obstacles do not block line of sight. Gaia's switch allows her to move an obstacle within range 1-4. Because minions count as obstacles, well, she can move minions. So she can move jackpots further away from enemies, so they're safer from the melee, or can move them up forward to range 1-3 for the switch on the jackpots. Additionally, while minions may not be deployed adjacent to each other, she can move them next to each other after they've been deployed. Maybe not necessarily the greatest thing in all situations, but I'm sure you'll find times where, say, making a gauntlet of Gorgonians is useful, and likewise, if you're attacking one jackpot, having another one right next to it isn't necessarily a bad thing either. For tactics, Earth's Fury is essentially a nuke for the deployment zone. This is great for Fiddler because it is uncontested damage and can help finish off enemies who are threatening her or her jackpots. Likewise, the displacing of enemy helps Fiddler should she need to get away. Same for Gaia, obviously. Tectonic Shake allows you to move the scoring zone. If Fiddler is prepared, she can defend the scoring zone and capitalize on the switch. Note that this tactic is not allowed in all scenarios. You'll want to check the current AGL document if you are in organized play as to where it is or is not allowed. Gaia's Obliteration allows her to alter the board via obstacles. This includes, again, jackpots and Gorgonians. The team can make good use of this for protecting the scoring zone, hemming in the enemy team, etc. And finally, Pyrogenesis allows you to set up Fiddler and her jackbox, then drop them off wherever you want. This is actually a very nice upgrade to Siren. Fiddler to threaten areas. As with Bachman and Hammerhead, Gaia and Fiddler have a kind of a yin-yang complementary relationship. Whereas Gaia protects by using control, Fiddler complements her by controlling via remote activation's offense. While technically Fiddler's jackpots have a range of 1-5 using bursts, The severity of their attacks become much more pronounced at range 1 to 3 by the introduction of their switch, where by spending 1 block they can impose the burning state to the target. Additionally, remote activation's own switch allows for additional bursts. So again, you see the interplay here. Gaia's Gorgonians can keep enemies away from the Vulcan jackbots, keeping them functional longer. Likewise, the jackbots basically add a additional punch to the Gorgonians, since the Gorgonians will keep enemies locked up and stuck, and having a hard time getting away while they're pretty much sitting ducks. And again, the Gorgonians don't block line of sight. Forward Observer puts marked on a target range 1 to 3 from a jackbot. If the 2 jackbots have overlapping fields of fire, this would allow one to ignore the line of sight requirement for burst. This is useful if there's a blocked space, intervening characters, smoke, etc. And again, minions are obstacles, and obstacles do not block line of sight. So this is kind of making sure that the synergy between the Gorgonians and the Vulcan jackbots is kept up, even if there is some use of states or obstacles. You could be facing Bichet, for instance. That would normally prevent the synergy from really being maximized. So this is kind of a little bit of an insurance policy, if you will. Now, bear with me a little bit, but deployments. This is a very inexpensive ability for a Fiddler to use and requires no roll. That's fantastic. She can spend 1 action point to deploy both jackbots. On her turn, that means she could have no jackbots deployed. Spend 2 action points to move 5. No jackbots deployed, she gets bonus movement. Spend another 2 to move another 5. And finally deploy both jackbots for the final point within range 1 to 2 to her. Now this is fantastic for setting up. She's basically gotten her jackbots 12 spaces out. More practically, you could spend 2 to move 5, deploy both jackpots for 1, then use remote activation to begin your offense. So really, I mean, gosh, you could be threatening enemies, attacking enemies from 7 to 12 spaces away. The reason I make mention of all of this is this meshes very well with Gaia's ability to move from deployment zone to deployment zone without Gaia having to use Siren to get Fiddler from point A to point B. And the reason this is important is, yes, Gaia's got these great movement abilities. She can teleport people. She can deploy her own minions, and that's fantastic. But the thing is, Gaia's minions are more expensive than Fiddler's. Fiddler can spend 1, get both out, basically no questions asked. Gaia spends 2 to get 1 out, maybe 2 out. So anything you can do to let Gaia spend less on deployment, or do other things other than deploying, is kind of good. So basically, Gaia would only have to spend 2 to move. That would leave her 3, and then she could deploy a Gorgonian, maybe 2. Fiddler can just run on up after that. So it depends on the situation and what makes the most sense in the given game, and really at that moment. For tactics, well, Outbreak makes excellent use of well-positioned or under attack minions. Note that it uses allied minions as the target wording. So this means you can use the jackbots and the Gorgonians. Now, again, as we said mentioned in deployment, Gaia's Gorgonians do cost 2 action points each to deploy. Even if she hits her switch, it's a greater opportunity cost for her to actually have to replace them than it is for Fiddler to replace the jackbots. But I think with when you look at when you use this, you'll be able to make kind of a cost benefit analysis to go into it. Certainly, a Gaia that's on the bench is worse off than one that has to replace one of her Gorgonians. Speaking of which, Vaporized Napalm is a good follow-up for Outbreak and allows you to cash out the burning states before the opponent can remove it. Used in combination with Outbreak, that would be 2 uncontested damage. Ideally, the Jackbox would have put on more burning before that, but again, you can use Jackbots or Gorgonians. But still, 2's pretty good. Now, don't be in a big rush to use this unless the opponent has a way to remove states, or maybe you don't have too much fire on them. So, Mechanized Deployment is a great way to immediately follow up Gaia moving and deploying by allowing Fiddler to get her Jackbots into optimal position without spending any energy on moving and deploying. And what this does is free up your action point budget for using remote activation and even forward observer. So this allows Fiddler to really fill in the damage side of the pair. So, if you spend 2, and you could possibly get 4 attacks out of that. That's pretty awesome. And finally, Energy Shield, well, it doesn't do much for Gaia directly, but it does help keep Fiddler alive. And since Gaia really has no offense outside of Contender, this is kind of an important consideration, keeping Fiddler alive. So, but when you look at these two characters, they mesh together very nicely. One sets up sort of your perimeter, and the other one punishes enemies for getting into that perimeter. That's a very nice and easy way to use it. And even beyond that, you could control 2 larger areas, one where Gaia is kind of blocking it off and making it hard to get into, and Fiddler's there in another area, just taunting them. Yeah, come on, just get a face full of lead. And really, I know with our group using both Gaia and Fiddler has just been something we've really enjoyed. Certainly, Keep a Hooligan loves the Gaia bomb, where she just drops off some unreasonable character, such as Moonchild, Muter, or even Fiddler, in the enemy deployment zone first thing. It's beautiful. It works beautifully. But I'm sure you'll come up with your own combinations. So next week is going to be Reckless Hearts, Axel Steel and Hippolyta. They like to get up front and personal, as it were. And that'll be it for this week's Simple Synergies. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.